Hey everyone, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall, and today we're going to talk about one of the most classical elements of any sandbox game, and that is the random encounter. I want to talk about it because I see some comments on my videos that are generally not a fan of sandbox games, and they usually make comments about how everything in a sandbox feels really random. There's nothing that kind of really makes sense, and it all just feels kind of like these disjointed vignettes that really have the players feel like they're kind of wandering aimlessly. And a lot of them seem to think that the random encounter is just kind of this roll on a table, right? Maybe you encounter some skeletons, you fight them, you get a little bit of XP, maybe they have some treasure on them, and then you just kind of move on, and you probably run into the next random encounter, and it's another basic fight like that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like those types of random encounters don't happen in sandboxes. They do. They definitely occur, and they're definitely a part of that structure. But I think what these players or game masters are missing is the idea that you can transform a random encounter from just kind of those basic fights into a more powerful storytelling tool. That's right. So today we're going to talk about how to level up our game mastering by designing random encounters that tell those organic, those emerging stories. We're going to move beyond the simple fights and create encounters that introduce new NPCs, hint at factional conflicts, or reveal interesting information about your game world. So let's go ahead and dive into it. First, let's think about the why and the what. Why are these creatures here? What are they doing when the party encounters them? Instead of just being a monster on the road or in the woods, we need to think about giving them some sort of purpose within the scene. Imagine your players are traveling through a forest, you roll a random encounter check, and you get goblins. Okay, under the kind of basic random encounter framework, the players might see 6 goblins, the goblins draw their weapons, a fight ensues, the players win, they loot the bodies, and they move on. Let's consider it under a little bit more of an emergent story framework. The players see 6 goblins, but the goblins don't have their weapons ready, they're not attacking. Instead, they are frantically digging a shallow grave. As the players approach or come into line of sight, the goblins are clearly nervous. They look at the players, they look back at the grave, they look at the woods, deciding what they want to do. Do you see the difference with that? Suddenly the goblins aren't just a basic combat challenge. It could become that if the players attack them, they might be ready to defend themselves, but now they're a bit more a part of the scene and actively doing something rather than just randomly traveling through and intersect with the party at the same point in time. This encounter starts to ask some questions that the party can think about. Who are they burying? Why are they so nervous about it? And what are they clearly afraid of if they're looking at possible escape routes away from the party? You've sort of introduced a mini mystery. Maybe they're burying a goblin from a rival tribe, hinting at a factional conflict. Or maybe they're burying a human, hinting that other humans are nearby and they're possibly hostile with these goblins. You've turned this kind of simple combat encounter into a potential hook for further investigation for the party to check out if they want to do so. So how do we do this? How do we go from that encounter with just the goblins to turning it into goblins digging a grave? You might think, that sounds great. That sounds really interesting, but I have to improvise that on the spot. That can be really tough for some people. Let's go ahead and break it down a little bit so we can talk about things you might want to consider. And then we'll also talk about a few things that you can use to aid you a little bit later in this video. So step 1 is your context is going to be king. Before you even roll on your random encounter table, think about the location that the players are currently in where this random encounter is going to occur. Think about who or what has influence and occupies this nearby area. We can really lean on those. Maybe we can borrow elements from them and introduce them into this random encounter. If the players are in a swamp, maybe the encounter isn't just this crocodile that they come across, but it's a crocodile with a half-eaten shield wedged into its teeth. The shield bears a family crest of the nearby noble house that recently had some party members go missing. This simple detail tells a bit of a story about the world and connects connects this random creature to the ongoing narrative within that area of your game world. If you have a hooks or rumor table, you can definitely glance at that to see if you can borrow any of those elements to connect to this random encounter when you're building it on the spot. Step 2 is to add a little bit of a human element to these encounters. That doesn't mean you have to add humanoids to every encounter. It just means that you should maybe think about adding some details that make the encounter relatable or intriguing to the party. Maybe the party comes across some bugbears they find that are haggling with a desperate looking merchant. Or maybe the party sees an ogre off in the distance that isn't just breaking things, but is rather carefully carrying a large locked chest. Now, these both introduce some interesting elements. In the case of the first one, there's a couple new NPCs, the merchant the players could interact with, or the bugbears. Why are they haggling with the merchant? What necessarily do they want from him? Maybe that's something the party could also assist with. In the other case, it introduces a little bit of a mystery. What's in the ogre's chest? Now, this could turn into a potential brawl if the party wants to fight the ogre for the chest, or it could be a little bit more of a social encounter or a puzzle if the ogre is doing something interesting or peculiar with that large chest that they're carefully carrying away. Lastly, step 3, we need to think a little bit about the aftermath. A good encounter doesn't just end when the dice stop rolling. We need to really think about what happens after the party has finished interacting with that encounter. Let's go ahead and go back to our goblin example. If the party chooses to help those goblins, then maybe those goblins will become allies and can provide some information to the party in the future or about the current situation in the area that the players find themselves in. If the party attacks those goblins, then maybe the tribe they belong to will now hold a grudge against humans, and they decide to attack a nearby human village, seeking some revenge for their fallen comrades. The consequences of the player's actions should ripple through the game world, and the results should be relayed back to the party via different informational sources. Let's go ahead and put this all together with an example. Let's say your players are traveling along a forested road. You roll a random encounter and you get a knight. Under the standard kind of basic encounter structure, perhaps the knight challenges the players or a player to a duel, fight, maybe to the death, maybe not, and then the kind of encounter is resolved and maybe the party goes their separate ways from the knight. Under an emerging story encounter, we can change that a bit. Maybe the players see a lone wounded knight. He's not hostile. In fact, perhaps he's disoriented and kind of barely able to sit on his horse. As the party interacts with him, he's perhaps mumbling some delirious nonsense, something about a silver key and a red moon. In addition to that, he has a tattered banner with a crest that the party might recognize. Now, this is starting to become a bit of a narrative encounter. It introduces the new NPC, a knight, and it presents a little bit of a mystery. What exactly is he talking about with this key and this moon? And it hints at a little bit of the wider world. That crest on that banner tells the party which faction he might belong to. Now, from here, the party has a few choices. They could choose to help him, they could choose to heal him, they could choose to rob him, and each of these choices are going to have their own consequences. If they help him, then he might lead them to a secret location or the faction's base, or possibly share some further information about these things he's mumbling about. Maybe they're a conspiracy, maybe there's some other lore connected to your setting. And if they rob him, they might also find out some of those clues if they're kind of written clues or details that the party can infer from whatever they take from him. But they'll also make an enemy out of that knight, an enemy out of the faction that he belongs to, and there's definitely going to be some consequences associated with that as well. So you can see that this one random encounter really has the potential to kick off a lot of different adventuring choices for the party. And all this comes from your random encounter and giving it a little bit of context, thinking about, what details you might want to tie in. Maybe you look at your rumor table or your lore tables to get a little bit of ideas on things you might want to borrow. Maybe that's where you get your silver key or red moon from, or maybe you just have some other improv tables that you can roll on to get some subjects that you can tie into these encounters. So the next time you're prepping a game or you're actually running a game and you're really thinking about these random encounters, remember to give them some purpose. Just ask yourself, who is this creature really? What are they doing in this moment? They're not just sort of this random passing through intersection with the players at the exact same time. And how can you take this encounter and connect it to the world that you've been building? You're the game master. You know the most about your world and how you're designing it. How can you really tie this random encounter into kind of a fun and intriguing way for your party? By doing this, you're really going to transform a simple roll on a random encounter table into a vibrant, living moment that makes your sandbox feel more real and more exciting to your players. If you feel like you struggle to come up with some of these ideas on the fly, then make some random tables for them. It's a great way to keep your ideas fresh, and it lets you be just as surprised as the party. I use them all the time. You can have action tables, you can have context tables. You can roll on these and get some ideas for, what is the context of this creature and what it's doing here. You can have lists of factions associated with the nearby area, and maybe you can roll on those to see if one of them is somehow involved in the encounter. Even if they're not physically present in the encounter, you could have maybe a message from one of them or that broken shield with the coat of arms from one of these factions. Give yourself the procedural tools so that you can devise these interesting emergent stories at the table, and that's really going to kind of help you run a plotless game in a really fun and interesting way. This way, you're not really going to fall into the rut of just 6 goblins out on patrol with their weapons drawn, devolving into yet another simple fight between the players and some goblins. Let me know in the comments below if you have any favorite story-based random encounters. Did they evolve into some sort of greater adventure? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. It really does help out a lot. And subscribe if you haven't already. Consider checking out Enchanted Nimbus. It's my monthly newsletter on Substack. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.